Hello, today we are going to set up and configure DHCP services on Windows Server 2008 R2. DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. Essentially what it does is that rather than having to configure a static IP address on each client workstation, all you need to do is to have your DHCP server set up with a scope or range of IP addresses that it can distribute to the client machines, and client machines will simply accept one of those addresses assigned and be automatically configured for the network. So we're going to first of all go into our server manager and we are going to add that role. So we're going to go here and we're going to click on add roles. We're going to check DHCP server, click next, and we note that our server already has a static IP configured, which is a requirement for DHCP. So we're going to continue, and our preferred DNS server, we're going to leave that as is. Just going to validate, and it is valid because this server is also the DNS server for the network. We do not need wins. That is an outdated requirement. Most networks these days are unlikely. It's not impossible. It's only if you're running older operating systems like Windows NT4 or similar. It's not likely to be present in any modern network since these OSs are no longer supported. And we can here add in a scope, but we're not going to do that here. Reason being, I want to show you another way after the setup is done where we can actually set up our scope and give some more personalized settings. So we're going to click next. We don't want to have DHCP v6, so we're going to continue. We're going to use our current credentials because I have logged in fact as the administrator. So we have Active Directory installed, and therefore the DHCP server needs to be authorized. So we're going to use these credentials to authorize the DHCP server. So we are now going to install. Okay, so we have succeeded with our installation. Now we are going to in fact configure our DHCP server. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we are going to add a scope. So we right click and we click new scope, click next. I'm going to give this scope a name. In this case, I'm probably going to use my initials, similar to the fact that I have that on my domain. So KH scope. And we give it a start IP address. So we want to have, seeing that our server is already 10, 192.168.0.10, I don't want anybody else to have that. So I can do one of two things. I can either reserve it, which I will show you how to do later, or I can simply begin the scope after that address. That is the course I'm going to choose in this case. And we are going to end. let's say perhaps 150. Now this is more than enough for the clients that I have set up on my machine, but it depends on your own network size and number of clients that you have, that sort of thing, that you're going to determine exactly where and how you are going to assign your range. So we're going to click next, and here we're going to add an exclusion range. Now let's say I wanted to support servers only on let's say between 192.168.0.11 to 192.168.0.20. We can add that. So even though our range, our scope technically begins at 11, I can exclude these IP addresses and have them reserved specifically for servers. And this is what I wanted to show you specifically, and that is one of the reasons why I did not set it up using the wizard. Here, for demonstration purposes, I want to set my lease times, and because I want to demonstrate how quickly the leases can work, how they can be released and reassigned, I'm going to just set mine to 1 minute. So we're going to click finish, and then what we're going to do is that we are going to activate the scope. So now if we look at our setup, we're going to see that our scope extends from 11 to 150, but we have an exclusion zone of 11 to 20. So we're going to actually test this in practice and verify that it works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up one of my clients that previously had been configured with static IP address. So we're going to go to our network and sharing center. This is on our Vista client, and we're going to manage our network connections. And here on our local area connection, we are going to change the IP address configuration. We're going to have it obtain an IP address automatically. Now if this works, when we check the status of our network adapter, we should in fact see that it has in fact been assigned an IP address. And in fact we do. So it has been assigned IP address 192.168.0.21. Remember, our scope, even though it began at 11, we excluded ranges from, we had an exclusion range from 11 to 20, which we reserved specifically for servers. So we will hit close, and if we also go back to our server and we look at address leases, here we'll see the Vista machine has in fact been assigned an address. So once again, what we're going to do, I'm going to configure another client. This time I'm going to use my Windows 7 client. We're going to configure it again to obtain an address dynamically. And we just wait for this to refresh itself, and if we click on our details here, we will see that, remember, our previous client was assigned 021, so now this one has been assigned 022. Now here's what we're going to do. Just to test that in fact we are receiving IP addresses from the server and doing so on a dynamic basis. Here you see both clients have been assigned, and we look at the lease expiration and we realize that it's going to be expiring within a minute or so. So what we're going to do is that we are going to simply disable. Remember, this one had this Vista box had the first IP address that was assigned on the network. What we're going to do is that we're going to disable this network device so that this one will no longer have an IP address. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to go to our Windows 7 client, and we are going to do this. We are going to start our command prompt, and we are going to release the IP address. So we're going to type ipconfig/release, and then we are going to renew. Now, because of the time, we hadn't allowed it enough time for the lease to expire on the server, so we again got the .22 address for this machine. So we're going to repeat that procedure again. And we're going to try it one more time. And once again, it did not work. So we're going to do this the hard way. We're going to disable. We're going to check our server. And we're going to delete. So now we have no addresses having been leased. So if we now go back and we enable our network connection, let's look again at our status, check our details. And for some reason, my server chooses to continue to assign that particular IP address to our client. There's another way that we can get around this. What we can do is that we can do a reservation. If I wanted to have that particular machine being given to the Windows 7 machine, I can do it this way. I can just give it a description, and I can say I want it to have 021 as the IP address. Now what I need to get is the MAC address for that machine. So we're going to go again and we check on our status, and here we have our physical address or our MAC address. So we're going to see 08, type that into a notepad document, (080027 AD) D8 34. And we're going to assign that here. added. Okay, seem to have a bit of a problem here. Great. So now we have our configuration set up. So once again, we are going to disable and enable. And let's see what address we have this time around. And here we go. We have 021 because that is the address that we have reserved for our client based on the MAC address that we specified. So let's look again at our configuration, and we look at our leases, and we notice here that our lease expiration is inactive for this particular client simply because it is reserved. If we refresh, we notice that more than 1 minute has passed, and therefore the lease on the 021 address has been released. So if we go again to our Vista client and we enable our network connection, let's wait for it to get an address. Check the status, and here we notice now that this machine that was previously assigned 021 is now assigned 022. So that concludes our demonstration of DHCP server on Windows 2008 server. Thank you very much for viewing.